Look, this was an amazing diplomatic effort from the Australian government, something we really haven't seen before, Michael, in terms of the deal that was made between Australian and the US administration officials to bring Mr Assange home. I want to bring in Tom Lowrey, our political reporter here, who was also following the events last night because Anthony Albanese spoke last night. Tom, quite a moment in his prime ministership also.
Yeah, good morning, Bridget. Anthony Albanese is really presenting this as a triumph of diplomacy, I suppose. Careful and cautious diplomacy, he would describe it. He's been careful not to wade into the arguments over who Julian Assange is, what he represents and what he's done, but really making the point that regardless of where you stand on Julian Assange and his actions over the past decade and a half, there was this broad sense, not just in the Labor Party, the Albanese government, but across the Parliament, that the time had come for him to be released. The optics of yesterday were quite interesting. We were sort of wondering, given it's a sitting week, given the Prime Minister is here in Canberra, the Foreign Minister Penny Wong is also here in Canberra, will they be there at the airport to welcome Julian Assange home? I mean, this is something they want to celebrate, I suppose. They say this is, a good outcome, a very positive outcome, but there's a sensitivity because he is now a convicted felon in the United States. He was convicted of conspiracy to commit espionage, and so that does make things a little bit interesting. Anthony Albanese at that press conference last night was careful not to wade into this, but make clear that this is the right outcome for Julian Assange and for Australia. Here's a bit of what he had to say.
As Prime Minister, I have been very clear that regardless of what you think of his activities, Mr Assange's case had dragged on for far too long. I have clearly and consistently, at every opportunity and at every level, advocated for Mr Assange's case to be concluded. I am very pleased that this saga is over.
That was Prime Minister Anthony Albanese speaking last night. We understand he had a phone call with Mr Assange while Mr Assange was still on the plane on the tarmac last night. What other political reaction has there been, Tom?
Yeah, that phone call itself has become quite interesting because that's been picked up by some in the opposition who were also careful to welcome Julian Assange back and say that this is the right outcome for him and for Australia as well. But there were already warnings yesterday that some were arguing that he should not be seen as a hero. This should not be a hero's welcome. And the Shadow Foreign Affairs Minister, Simon Birmingham, picked up on that phone call last night. Anthony Albanese tweeted it. He put it out to his social media. We might have a graphic available of Simon Birmingham responding to that post from Anthony Albanese. He said, "This call is neither necessary nor appropriate. Julian Assange was not wrongfully detained like Chung Lei, Sean Turnell or Kylie Moore-Gilbert. For 12 years, Assange chose to avoid facing justice in countries with fair judicial systems. He is undeserving of this treatment." So some fairly strong criticism there from the coalition about the Albanese government's immediate handling of Julian Assange's return. They're making the point there that while it is the right thing for Julian Assange to no longer be imprisoned, for this to have been resolved, that he shouldn't be celebrated necessarily as a journalist or as an advocate for press freedom as such, as someone who, in their view, has sought to avoid prosecution over time for his actions, to avoid being held accountable, in their view, for his actions.